My name's Shivani Gupta. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a wife. I'm a mum. I'm a yogi, a lover of wine and margaritas, and a pretty good friend, I think. I have a speaking and mentoring business where I mainly take people in leadership, whether they're running their own businesses or they're leaders in the corporate world, and are really wanting to grow different aspects of their leadership. I speak at different conferences, and I also run some organic day spas. Look, it's not something when I was at school that I thought, yes, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. In fact, that wasn't a word that was used a lot. I started my career as an engineer, followed my dad's and my grandfather's footsteps, and I think I meandered through a whole heap of different career paths before I actually arrived at this particular one. One of the things I really loved about being an entrepreneur was the freedom of time, and I didn't want to be working for other people. And it took me about a decade in the corporate sector to do that for a while, to then realize, sometimes you have to do something to work out what you don't want to do, to actually arrive at what you do want to do. I read a beautiful quote a few years ago that said that entrepreneurs work 24/7 because they don't want to work 9 to 5. And I loved that saying. I thought, absolutely, I want to work for myself and I don't want to report to other people. So I'm in charge of what hours I work, what I produce. So that was probably the big thing that really attracted me to it. I've worked with some fantastic mentors myself, and one of the really cool things that I've learned is how to prioritize your top 3 things. So each day I make a list at the end of the day for what I'm going to work on the next day, and they're my musts. And often in my top 3, there's at least one task that I don't love doing, but I know that I must do it. So my top 3 things go into my diary for the first thing that I do. The second thing that I do is I spend time with my top 3 leaders in the businesses. So I have a daily, what I call a huddle. So we have a daily meeting. I usually do it standing up. My team will do it standing up. With COVID, because a couple of those businesses are interstate with the borders being shut. So one of the things I've really learned to do is how do we do that using technology, but how do we do a daily rhythm? How do we set up a daily rhythm of what we need to focus on for the next 24 hours? So I find that that's super helpful in terms of being able to work out, so if I do that bit, that'll give me enough momentum to work on what needs to be done the next day, and then after that, the next day. So it starts to create that momentum. I make sure that I've got some time for me. Some people call it self-care. For me, my mind, it goes crazy. I have 1,000 ideas a week. And so one of the musts for me is to meditate. And so I usually try and take a minimum of 10 minutes, but I really find that my head gets so full with things and thoughts and ideas and things I haven't done, and then being a mum and doing everything else, that I find that it's so important to empty my head. Look, I don't think there's any such thing as balance. I think that there's moments of it. So there's probably moments where I go, I am so deep into my work right now. How much am I loving it? And to me, I spend a lot of time trying to be present with what I'm doing. So I find that when I'm really in a bit of work and I start to worry about logistics of, soccer and cricket and basketball training, I completely go off my path. And then when I'm with the kids and I'm looking at my device, I find that really puts me off being present as a parent. So I find being present really challenging, but I find that if I can try and stay in, almost use my diary as a schedule to say, look, Shivani, there's no point now worrying about what the kids are doing. There's no point worrying about what, such and such is doing. Just focus on this particular thing that you're doing. And I try and do that in half an hour to hour lots. Then that just helps me focus on it, because I think one of the places where I lose a lot of energy, and I come across people that lose a lot of energy, is when they are doing something, but they're worrying about something else. And it takes them from that present moment that a lot of amazing teachers and leaders speak about. So if I can just focus on what I'm trying to do without any guilt associated with what I'm not doing, then that, keeps me really focused. I'm a complete nerd, so I love learning. So I started my career off as an engineer. I moved into sales and marketing. I did an MBA and specialised in some strategic planning. And even though that was a long time ago, when I look at, me working as an engineer a number of years ago now, I don't stop learning. I'm currently doing a course in the UK, and, I just believe that that's one thing school's just the start of it. And although the structure of it changes in terms of how we learn, I would love to be just a lifelong learner. And I think that's one of the things when I watch people who are, super successful, but, super extraordinary, maybe like take somebody like a Bill Gates or a Richard Branson or a Brene Brown. One of the things that they do is they're constantly learning. They're constantly going to courses. They're constantly carrying a little notebook in their pocket, learning from people, even though they may not be as successful as them. Yes, I've got some tertiary qualifications, but I just think that I just hope till the day I die, I keep my brain really active and I'm staying in my super nerdy mode and keep learning something, whether that's related to work or other things. I require so many soft skills. When I look at where I started my career, where I thought I have to have all this technical knowledge, really in hindsight, I look at my life now and think soft skills is the number one skill you need to have to be successful. Doesn't matter what career you're doing, doesn't matter who you're working for, even in a relationship, in a family, your soft skills are the number one lesson. And I just hope that in the future, there's more and more of that learning throughout schools, throughout universities, and, still the focus on technical knowledge. I read this fantastic book a few years ago, which I wish I'd read when I was in school. And it was called About Love Languages. And it's about how people work. And it's about how we tend to love people the way that we want to be loved, but really it's so important to love people the way that they want to be loved, and that people have different love languages. That's probably where I started my soft skills. And since then I have spent a lot of money and a lot of time trying to learn people skills with some extraordinary teachers around the world. I have a couple of great mentors now where I'm constantly trying to work on that. And to me, when I can just constantly work on the art of learning my soft skills, I think it's going to make me so much more of a successful human at home, but also in my business. One of the things that I've learned, like I just spoke about the book, The Love Languages, is really learning the art of understanding people's passions and what drives them. So I found that when I hire people in my businesses, I tend to hire people because I've got a set of values and I've got my set of passions in terms of how I operate. And my ideal mix is somebody who can carbon copy me, right? Who's exactly the same as me. But that doesn't happen. There are people that I work with, their number one passion is money. Then I work with people who come to work, but their number one passion is their family. I come with people who really are there to learn something, and I know that I've maybe got them from 3 to 5 years. So one of the things that I've learned, and I would so encourage you to do, is to really work out and tune into people when they speak and what they speak about. What are they really passionate about? And if you want to become an extraordinary leader, what you want to do is talk less and listen more, and really tune your listening skills to work out what motivates people, what are they into, and then be able to work out how do you get them talking more about what they're passionate about and link it into you producing. So for example, I have an amazing leader and her number one passion is health. She is into fitness, she does little mini marathons, all the stuff that I don't love doing. Now, because I know that work is not her number one passion, but health is her number one passion. And as a business person, I can do that is I actually pay for her membership to her gym each year, which I know really links into her loyalty, but also really links into her passion. And she's now worked with me for about 3.5 years. And I love the fact that I can provide that to her to feed her passion. And in return, she feeds my passion around the work. So I think as leaders, but whether you're at school, whether you start your first job, whether you work in hospitality, whether you end up running your own business, really learn the art of looking and listening to people in terms of what they're interested in, and then talk to them about it. And often with my kids, I use this example and I say, look, let's say we go to France. And when we go to another country, we don't need to learn the whole language. We just need to learn little things like, hello, thank you. How much is this? May I sit down? And so I think the art of really soft skills, it's not about, you don't have to learn everybody else's language, but you need enough to be able to communicate with them to work out what it is that'll start that conversation and keep them engaged in that conversation and get people talking about them, not about you. In different businesses, I obviously need different skills. So for example, the assistant that I have, I need somebody who's very detailed. who's all over fantastic, at organising diaries. I need somebody who is really good with people when she's dealing with a bunch of different people. In the spas, obviously, I need people that have got technical skills around being able to perform treatments. And then when I look at my leaders that work in the different businesses, I need people that have got really good leadership skills. And that often is that mixture of hard skills that they have technically in that industry, but also their soft skills in terms of how they engage with their teams, but also their soft skills in terms of how they engage with me. I think every industry needs the mixture of those, and you want to get clear about kind of the things that you need, and then the things that make you a little bit more attractive to an employer, because then they go, wow, they've got this hard skills and they've got these soft skills, but look at this, they've also done this. So if you've got, from a school perspective, if you've done extracurricular activities, I think it comes in really handy. And I remember watching this fantastic video on YouTube of the late Steve Jobs, and he was saying when he was at university, and he wasn't doing very well at university, you wouldn't think so, and he was dropping out of quite a few subjects, he decided to take a class on calligraphy. And he said, I got so passionate about and interested in calligraphy. At that stage when he did that, he didn't realise that that would become such an important part of Apple products. He didn't know that then. So constantly learning and knowing that nothing is wasted when you're learning, because at some point it'll come in really handy. I get people saying to me now, well, Shivani, you don't work as an engineer now. Did you feel that 4 years was wasted at university? Absolutely not. It was absolutely not wasted. I'm renovating something at the moment. I use all those skills in renovating and talking to tradies and being one of the boys, and I can understand where some of those technical skills are used. So I might not use them every day and all the time, but whatever you learn will never ever go to waste. You just might not know that you're going to need it at some point in the future. So I love the fact that while I've got young kids, can have the flexibility of getting out of my work gear and getting into my mum gear, as I call it, and picking up my kids almost every day and taking them to sport and sitting on the sidelines and, watching their sport or watching them practice something. So I love that freedom of time, and that's probably the one thing that attracted me to it the most, because at times as an entrepreneur you have, it's not that easy running your own businesses. At times there's fluctuations in what you earn, and you've still got bills, etc., to pay. Sometimes you have great months, other times you don't. Sometimes you take risks. I started a new business about 5 years ago that didn't work, and I had to shut it down after about 10 months. Some pretty expensive but amazing learnings that came out of it. For me, a lot of it is about constantly learning, as I said, about testing. But, I also don't think this is it. I think that there'll be other businesses that I'll run in the future. I don't know what they are yet. I don't know what those opportunities are, but I'm constantly looking at gaps in the market and how why isn't that happening? And often it comes from something somebody's not doing in terms of how either I could do it or why isn't somebody else doing that in the marketplace. Dealing with people is the most joyous thing, and dealing with people is also the most challenging thing. Often I find challenging people, not because they're demanding or they're asking a lot of questions, it's the people that haven't treated me well. Like, I think I'm a fairly fair person and a fairly even keeled person, but there are times when I've treated somebody really well and they haven't treated me very well. And as much as I want to be able to mentally put that aside, I'm still a human being, not a human doing, and it affects me. It affects my emotions. I get upset when people don't treat people really well. Find injustices in the world pretty hard to deal with at different times. So it's challenging to deal with people sometimes when they don't treat you well. Sometimes there's things that happen in the environment that I have zero control over that I find really challenging to deal with. So through COVID, some of my businesses have been shut down, partly because of what the federal government enforced, but partly because some of the changes happened in industry. And that was really challenging. Nothing that I could do, but I found that very challenging to then work out how do we get around that and how do I manage what may or may not work on the other side. So when I look at the speaking industry, a lot of my colleagues that work 100% in speaking are really challenged right now. So a lot of the conferences have either been cancelled, been moved, or gone virtual. Some of those clients are saying, look, you need to give us discounts, or people are being asked to do that, free of charge. Mentoring is going through the roof. A lot of people are wanting mentoring, so that part of the business is expanding and there's opportunities there. The spa business is, going through its ebbs and waves. There's quite a few challenges short term in terms of how we deal with things around COVID and restrictions, and not knowing what's going to happen on a daily basis. But in that industry, there's also wellness is one of the fastest growing industries, which was the reason that I stepped into that. So, how do we create more organic, more certified products? How do we engage with the clients more? And how do we differentiate ourselves when there's so many competitors in the marketplace to really stand out? Because so many people realise that it's a growing market. There's so many different newcomers coming into the industry too. So how do we constantly try and differentiate ourselves is going to be really challenging, I think, over the next decade. Well, we tend to sponsor a lot of things. So I have a belief that, and I get that from my dad, who, we moved to Australia at the age of 11. He's the youngest of 9. We grew up with, buying lots of secondhand furniture and not having much money. But every birthday, every Christmas, every Diwali, we had to give money away. And I remember saying to my dad, we don't have as much to give away. Why can't I be the charity person that you give that money to? And he used to always say, Shivani, we have more than others. And so I love that philosophy about my dad. He's certainly one of the most inspirational people in my life. And so one of the things that we have is we give away 10% of our profits to a variety of charities. We have a view that wherever we're operating locally, we want to support some local charities. So we support things around domestic violence, we support things around homelessness. But I have a really deep-seated passion to also educate girls, and I believe that girls have the same opportunities and should have the same opportunities as boys, particularly in third world countries, around education, things we don't really have to think about here in Australia. And so I'm doing some work with a couple of not-for-profits in India, but they're also in 40 different countries, where they're trying to set up night schools for girls in rural areas, where these girls do not get that opportunity to go to school, even if we gave them the funding for it, which is only about $100 a year per child. So working with organisations that are already local to try and get them to night school safely, so that there's no abuse that happens on the way, so they can then enter the workforce and do things that are really deep for me. And so Scott and I, my husband and I, we personally sponsor some girls. The kids are raising some funds where we match half their funds to sponsor a child each, but our businesses support hundreds of girls a year, and that's a really intrinsic part of who I am. And I think we're a long way away from that, but I'm really inspired by people like Malala, who are trying to get girls educated all across the world, to say that this should not have such a big gap in our world, and that we should have kids educated all across the world. Don't get so stressed about what you're going to do. I know everybody asks you that in your life. What are you going to do next? Pick something. I always think if you don't know where to start, I remember making 2 lists. Get a piece of paper and one side write what you love. What are you really passionate about? And then on the second column, write what you're really good at. And if you can find some commonalities between column A and column B, let that be your starting point. But, for any young person, I look at my dad, who did 2 jobs in his whole life. I did 3 different jobs and 5 different businesses. Anybody that's young, you're probably going to have exponential on that. You might run 20 jobs or 30 businesses in your lifetime. So you're never going to stop learning. You're never going to stop creating. But if you're unsure, just start off with something that resonates with you, something that is meaningful for you, and know that that's may or may not be where you end up. If you asked me in year 12 that I was going to be an entrepreneur, I think they would have met with quite a big wall. Nobody understood it. I didn't understand it. And I'm still trying to understand it. And I just think it's important. Just start off with somewhere that you really enjoy, and don't get so stressed about where you're going to land. You'll be fine.